Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome. Welcome to the show. Thank you, everybody. Have you ever thought about writing a book or becoming a published author? I've found that most people have it on their bucket list of things to do, but very few follow through, let alone find a publisher. From the book Yours Till the End, we have best-selling author Shirley Kinsey's on the show. Amazing book. I think you're going to find this story very interesting. We'll also be hearing about a very endearing story between a little young girl and her grandfather. And I think you're going to find this story very inspiring. Author of the new children's book, Boppy and Me, Gabrielle Mazur is on the show. One of my personal favorites. If you ever thought about authoring a book or you just value the importance of family in your life, this is an episode you won't want to miss. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Stick with us. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome back. Welcome, everybody. I wanted to say many people write into the show and they ask us how they can be a part of the show, whether it be a part of the guest studio audience or maybe they have a great story they would like to tell. For that, please go to our website, tuesdayswithdan.com, or they can email us at info@tuesdayswithdan.com. And from the website, obviously, you can get our Facebook and Twitter link and all of that. Our next guest I'm very excited about. She's the author of the new children's book, Boppy and Me, Gabrielle Mazur, everybody. Welcome. A pleasure. How are you? I am really excited to have you on, and we've actually been talking for several months about having you on, and I'm particularly jazzed, and there's a couple of reasons why, which I'll share. But first of all, this is something my wife wanted me to work in there and kind of ask. I know that you work secularly, and you are a wife, a mother. Also, of course, you're now writing. How do you find time to juggle everything? Millions of mothers and authors, for that matter, want to know.
Yeah, busy, right? Well, I'm not a very organized person by nature. My husband will tell you that. But I find that a routine definitely helps. Get into a routine and try to stick with it.
Yeah, and I can imagine with a young daughter, and she's
9.
9, okay, so I have a 5-year-old, and kids in general, I think, can be a handful. Yeah. So you have to probably multitask. Yeah, during the summertime. So I'm sure there's a lot of multitasking, and
yes.
I'm sure, of course, I know your husband, Paul, he helps a lot as well. What made you want, I think there's a difference between publishing a book and then having their aspirations to actually become a writer.
There is.
I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of an entrepreneur that writes. By no means do I look at myself as a writer. I can probably put one out and through the right team and convey my thoughts to where it's going to be
the actual process of writing.
Being a writer is much different.
Yeah.
What made you decide to kind of go that direction?
I've always wanted to be a writer. It's been kind of a closet dream of mine. So it's something that I'm actually doing now. So I'm finding it very fulfilling. But I've always loved books and words. So.
I had a closet dream once. It was to be Bono, basically, but it didn't work out at all. And I think at this point, everybody just wants me to give up on that. Now, when becoming an author, was it everything that you anticipated it would be, or was it tougher? Because I found that there's a lot more to it than putting words to a paper and
it's not like you just sit at a desk and just write. There's so much more to it than that. But it's a lot more involved because you have to, you want people to read the book that you write.
Hopefully.
You have to market it. You have to build a website. You have to create book trailers and learn how to do all these things first, of course. So there's a lot of research involved and the best way to go about all those things. So it's not about just the writing. The writing part of it is only about 5%.
Yeah, sure. In fact, I think I read that marketing, as far as success, marketing is about 95%. The writing is 5%. Right. But have you found, I don't know if you'll agree with this, I found that if you take time, if you're thinking about writing a book and you take time to say, well, I got to learn how to get a website and drive people to it and do this and that, you'll probably never get started.
It can be overwhelming.
I think you got to kind of do what you did, is just dive in, get the book out, and then stick with it and figure out the rest you need to.
You do have to really see it like starting a business.
Yeah.
I had to get that mindset first, that it's like starting a business. There's a real entrepreneurial aspect to it. So if you want it to be a success. Because I actually had written books years ago, but it's a matter of getting them published and actually getting them made into a book.
Yeah, and I have to ask this, does the act of writing come easy to you? Or me,
I love it.
it's some reason when I sit down with a tablet, I go blank. So what I found is I'll have a audio or video, and then I'll transcribe that, and I'm just, it doesn't happen for me. But does
I actually really like pen and paper, which is unusual. A lot of people
type.
I do that too, but first I actually like to hand write it. That way I can edit it as I go, scratch things out, and just.
I'm old school, just like you. Well, and I think you commit it to memory a little easier when you mark it up.
For sure. Yeah.
I had a question for you. I wanted to ask you. You talked about the marketing and developing that at the same time, but did you actually discuss writing the book with your friends during the writing, or before you wrote it, or after the writing? I mean, how does that play in? Is it better to keep it quiet?
I hardly ever told anybody that I wrote. It was just something I did for me as like a therapy when I would get stressed or overwhelmed about something. I would just sit down and write. Of course, I'd have the idea in my head, but mostly I'd be inspired by my daughter or something like that, and I should write that down. My mom always told me, write it down.
Well, I had a chance to meet your daughter, and she could inspire most, I think. She's beautiful, but also she's very articulate, and she can hold a conversation. I mean, I talked to her one day for about 15 minutes, and I was just sitting there like, this is a very interesting young lady.
She's real creative too, but she's so different than I was when I was a kid. Yeah. So that's why it makes me go, wow, yeah, it's very inspiring.
Well, speaking of her, tell us a little bit about the book. Boppy and Me.
Yes.
And what inspired the story?
Well, obviously, it's about my daughter and the relationship that she has with my dad, her grandfather, who she calls Boppy. They have a very, very tight bond. And I think it was just because they spent so much time together when they were, from the time she was a little baby all the way up. They just had a real unique relationship.
Well, and when you read the book, first of all, I have to comment on the illustrations. It almost looks like artwork.
It is.
When you see it, it's almost like an art book. It's so beautifully done, and I think it also really captures her as well. But
the illustrator did a fantastic job.
Yes, and it's just there's such a feeling that you get when you read this. Is there a certain thing that you wanted to convey to the readers in writing this? Maybe a point or a certain thing to take away?
Certainly.
I took a lot away.
It's just so important to never underestimate the value of spending time with small children. Yeah. And I think a lot of times that job has been handed to moms or grandmothers, but actually for fathers and grandfathers too, to nurture a bond with a small child is very important.
And I have to say, was there a defining moment when you felt like, okay, I did it? Because as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, most people have this on their bucket list, like, I'm going to write a book. But when you actually had it in hand, and I know you're working on several of the stories, was there kind of that surreal moment when you felt like, hey, I did what I set out to do?
Yeah. Well, when you actually feel like you are an author, writing something is different than actually being an author or a writer. I would have to say it's that first time that on an introduction of meeting somebody new, when they shake your hand and say, so what do you do? And you actually
I'm an author. You have to embrace it.
I write children's books.
Right.
Instead of all the other things. Well, I work on the internet, or I'm a mom, or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
That first time where I actually said, I write children's books, I'm an author.
Yeah.
It kind of
And what was the response you saw? Like, whoa, really?
Yeah, they're like, oh, yeah. They were very interested. Yeah. It made me very interesting.
Well, good for you. I'm so happy about this book. And I have a 5-year-old, and I'm always looking for, it seems like books, they've been taking turns, and there was a big surge of these really low quality bargain type children's books, and having a 5-year-old, I would pick up half a dozen, and what I found is my kid always wants to read the same one. So every night I'm like, what story do you want to read? This one. I'm like, we just read that one. Nope, that's what I want. They recognize quality, and I think now there's a really big call for quality. People are tired of all the volume of books, and we'd rather just get our hands on one that's
And I wanted
really
to write something that the grown-ups who are reading the book to the child would actually enjoy also, that they wouldn't just be like, no, not that one, let's do this one.
Yeah, sure. Where can we get the book?
GabrielleMazurBooks.com is my website. You can learn more about it there. It's on Amazon.com and bookstores everywhere.
Okay, and Gabrielle Mazur is M-A-U-Z...
M-A-Z-U-R.
Z-U-R, okay,
Yeah.
we got it. Well, please come back. I know we talked briefly that you have a few other ideas of books that you're working on, so we'd love to have you come back. Thank you very much for being on.
Thanks
Gabrielle Mazur, everybody. We also, wow, they love it. We also want to give a thank you to Shirley Kinsey. And thank you so much, both of you, for coming on. I think that you've inspired me to get out there and start writing a little more. I've kind of fallen by the wayside with my writing. But that's our show, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to get involved in your local community and be forgiving of others. Good night, everybody.